there is a very spacious cell in the wall of our arteries. And that spacious cell is called the endothelial cell. Endothelial cell. Yeah, endothelial cell. Okay? Now, the job of that cell is to produce a very special molecule called nitric oxide. How many of you guys here have any medical background? Nursing, anything like that? Okay. All right. The job of the endothelial cell is to produce this molecule called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide in medical terms goes and causes what we call vasodilation. So nitric oxide causes the diameter of this artery to go bigger. So it goes and causes, if the diameter is supposed to be like this, it pushes it out even more. Okay? Now, when nitric oxide causes the diameter to be bigger, you will understand that if you have a pipe that is this wide, and you have a pipe that is this wide, the pressure in the pipe that is this wide is lower than the pressure in the pipe that is this wide, right? Okay. Nitric oxide, its job is to cause that pipe to go wider, to cause you to have a normal blood pressure. But nitric oxide can only be produced when you have energy. So, when you have insulin resistance, that results in the deficiency of... Better? Okay. I'm new to this stuff. Thank you. When you have insulin resistance, that now results in the deficiency of energy, the ATP molecule, right? This endothelial cell, which needs energy to make nitric oxide, doesn't have enough energy. So let's say the endothelial cell normally makes 100 molecules of nitric oxide. Let's say it normally makes 100 molecules. And those 100 molecules ensure that the artery looks this wide to cause you to have a normal blood pressure. You now have a deficiency of energy because of insulin resistance. You do not produce enough ATP. And so you have less energy available to the endothelial cell. So instead of the endothelial cell producing 100 molecules in an energy deficient state, the endothelial cell may only produce 40 molecules of nitric oxide. Okay? If 100 molecules of nitric oxide is needed to keep the blood vessel this wide for lower blood pressure, you now have 40 molecules being produced in an energy deficient state. Instead of that blood vessel being this wide, it's now this wide. A higher blood pressure in that blood vessel. Very simple. And I use just that to show you guys that energy deficiency is the cause of high blood pressure, insulin resistance. And I will go back and use this and just talk about this just a little bit. For the purpose of time, we cannot talk about all these diseases, but I want you guys to understand energy deficiency. A lot of people think that when you have cancer, especially adult cancers, you have bad luck. It's not bad luck, okay? Adult cancers are what we call energy deficiency discriminants. If you have a deficiency in energy in your body because of insulin resistance, you're at high risk of developing a cancer. There is a check and balance in our body. Our DNA is wrapped up in this double strand like this. And this double strand has to unwind and wind all the time. As this double strand DNA contains genes in them. And those genes dictate the running of our bodies and production of several different things in our bodies. Every minute or second or what have you in our body, a new protein is being produced, and it requires to decode the DNA strand to make that protein. So the DNA strand, which is wound around like that, has to wind, unwind, wind, unwind, wind. And so that process, when it winds, it exposes. When it winds, it goes and looks like this. And then maybe the remaining part is still unwind, but part of it unwinds to expose the genes here. The genes need to be exposed in order to decode what protein needs to be made, what enzyme needs to be made, what neurotransmitter needs to be made, or what have you. That process of winding and unwinding causes wear and tear. That wear and tear can cause mutations in the genes, okay? Just normal wear and tear. If I open the door, open and close, open and close, open and close, there'll be wear and tear of the door. It's just normal, you know. So, but the body has mechanisms designed, you know, to address the wear and tear. So any mutation in the gene because of the wear and tear, there are DNA damage processes. There is DNA, the body repairs any mutation or damage that comes from wear and tear. So every process in the body needs energy. When there is wear and tear of the door, if you have to hire somebody to fix the door, you have to pay them. The DNA, if you have to repair the damaged DNA from the wear and tear, you have to pay with energy. So when you do not have the energy, insufficient energy to repair the damaged DNA goes unrepaired. That unrepaired DNA now propagates into a cancer. So for the sake of this talk, I cannot go through all these diseases, but I want to just pick those two things to say how they're all linked to insulin resistance. I'm going to speed up now on this next topic because I want to explain to us how you develop insulin resistance. I mentioned that insulin resistance is when you have a breakdown in the process of insulin mobilizing glucose out of the blood into the cell. Okay, when you have a breakdown in that process, we say you have insulin resistance when there is a breakdown in this process. Okay, now, how does the breakdown occur? It's important to understand how the breakdown occurred to be able to fix the breakdown. If your car broke down, you took it to the mechanic. The mechanic first has to run diagnostic to understand how did this breakdown occur for me to be able to fix it. So I want you guys to understand how the breakdown occurred so that when I start showing you a solution of how to fix it, then you truly understand the solution and how, you know, the assertion I made here that all our chronic diseases are reversible. The breakdown in insulin resistance occurs in two steps, a two-step process. The first step in which you have the breakdown is what we call too much fat. Okay, too much fat. The first step then leads to the second step, too much insulin. That's how you have a breakdown of insulin resistance. And I'm going to explain to you. You guys have all heard of the saying that too much of a good thing is a bad thing, correct? Too much fat and too much insulin are bad. Fat is good. We need fat. The body has two sources of energy, glucose and fat. When you are in the daytime, your metabolism is high, your activity is high, the body uses or relies on glucose the most. 80% of our energy source or fuel source is glucose. In the nighttime, when we're not as active, when we're sleeping, when we're fasting, the body's glucose levels are low. When the body's glucose levels are low, the body needs to switch to using fat as a source of energy. Okay? So we need fat, you know, and the good fat that we need is what we call subcutaneous fat. That sits right at the top of our skin, okay? Now, how does too much fat now play into how you develop insulin resistance? This is what happens. When we eat, when we consume food, all the food we consume, all the calories any excess calories that we consume is converted into fat. So the body is very smart, very important. It knows the amount of calories it needs for its energy needs. Anything that is in excess it converts that excess into fat. Anything that, so when it converts that excess into fat, it takes that fat and goes and lumps it into the cell, which is not good. So this is how a cell is normally supposed to look like. So when you consume more calories than you're supposed to, the body takes those excess calories, converts them into fat, and comes and stores it in this cell. And I'm just going to do a replica of the cell. It comes and lumps that fat into this cell. Now that's not good. That's no bueno. Why? Because the job of insulin is to have glucose get into this cell. So normally, glucose should get into this cell. But that's the same cell that is now filled with fat. So that cell is so filled with excess fat right now. When insulin comes to this cell and tells this cell, hey, I got glucose in the blood. Knock, knock. I want to mobilize for you to take up that glucose into the blood. The cell tells insulin, I'm sorry. When insulin knocks on the door and you let glucose into the blood so energy can be produced, the cell tells insulin, I'm sorry. I don't got room in the inn. Yeah, where do you want me to put it? I'm so filled with fat. I'm sorry. And the cell refuses to open its doors to insulin. That's a breakdown. It refuses to open its doors to glucose. That's a breakdown, insulin resistance, and then you do not have energy. And the cell is telling the truth. Where should it put insulin? Where should it put glucose? It has no space. And this cell is acting like, somebody on Thanksgiving Day who was eating too much and they're so Thanksgiving full. Has any of you guys ever had that feeling, eating too much on Thanksgiving? I have. Not one, not twice, many times. When you eat too much on Thanksgiving, you're like, oh man, I ate too much. When you feel that Thanksgiving full, you don't more than belefun. It's like over the top. The last thing you're thinking is to put another bite of anything in your mouth. You are so full, you're so disgusted with yourself, you have no space. The last thing you're thinking is to put another bite of, even if it's your favorite thing in the world. That's how this cell is feeling. The last thing in the world it's thinking about doing is opening its doors to bring glucose in, because it is stuffed. And when glucose cannot come in, energy cannot be produced. You have a breakdown, insulin resistance. Too much calories results in excess fat being stuffed in that cell that led to that. That's the first way the breakdown occurs. The second way in which the breakdown occurs is too much insulin. Now, to understand this too much insulin issue, you have to understand that there is a one-to-one relationship between the amount of glucose in the blood and the amount of insulin. Too much insulin is no bueno. It's not good. Think about insulin as, I mentioned, insulin is very critical in our survival. It sits at the peak. It dictates everything. It's like the CEO of the company sitting right there at the peak. Dictates everything. When insulin is running well, things go well and smooth and what have you. When insulin is not, it's not good. And why is too much insulin not good? Imagine a CEO of the company, okay? Imagine insulin being the CEO of a company. A CEO of the company is supposed to dictate the structure and smooth functioning of that company. He comes into work one day, he's gone off. He's gone cuckoo. He's backing orders here and there, giving unreasonable orders, making rash decisions, shoving people here and there, giving people deadlines they cannot meet, just being a tyrant and bullying people. When insulin is too much, it is like a CEO that has gone nuts. And if you have a boss that has gone crazy, you lose your respect for that boss. Isn't that correct? You lose your respect for that boss. And when you lose respect for your boss, is it easier for you to do what that boss tells you to do or harder? It's hard, right? When you lose respect for somebody, it's hard for you to comply to what they say. So, how does that translate to the cell? When insulin becomes too much in the cell, it has now become tyrannical, a bully, a CEO that has gone nuts, yelling at the cell, shoving the cell. You must take up glucose how I want you to take it, when I want you to take it, like increasing its tone, and the cell loses its respect for insulin. And when the cell loses its respect for insulin, what does the cell do at insulin's command usually? To take in glucose, right? So when the cell now loses its respect for insulin, it clamps its door shut. Like, nah, that glucose way, tell me say ma take and so it no go happen. The door's closed. It has lost its respect for insulin. It's very less likely to do it. Also, when you lose respect for your boss, if your boss comes and tells you, hey, Jeannie, I have this project that we need to get it done in the next 2 months, can you get things together? Because you have no respect for the boss, you may get that project done at the deadline, but instead of giving that project your 100% best, you may give it 20%. You may do a lousy job. So it's what happens to the cells when they lose respect for insulin. And that is bad. Why is that bad? Because there is a one-to-one relationship between the concentration of glucose and the amount of insulin. So first, when this cell that is fat-laden, that cannot take up glucose, what happens is that glucose begins to accumulate in the blood. Okay, glucose begins to accumulate in the blood like this. Because this cell is pregnant with fat and cannot take up glucose, so glucose begins to accumulate in the blood like that. That high glucose that is accumulating in the blood is a trigger for the pancreas to produce a high amount of insulin. That's where the too much insulin comes from, right? That too much insulin that becomes that tyrant and all of that, and the cells lose their respect for insulin because of that. Now, when the cells lose their respect for insulin, the cells clamp their doors even shorter and makes more and more glucose be accumulated in the blood. So initially, this cell started as like this. It resulted in glucose accumulation in the blood, and because of a high glucose accumulation in the blood, the pancreas had to produce a commensurate higher amount of insulin. That high amount of insulin is that CEO that has gone cuckoo, that the employees no longer respect. When the employees no longer respect the CEO, insulin is no longer respected by the cells. The cells do not take in glucose from the blood or do a lousy job. So more and more glucose accumulates in the blood. So that more and more glucose, so think about it, the cells have lost respect for insulin and more glucose accumulates in the blood. That more glucose that accumulates in the blood, one-to-one relationship, because I now have even higher glucose, it causes the pancreas to produce even more insulin. So as if the boss who was crazy was not crazy enough, the boss raises his crazy level to this year, to another level. The boss becomes even more crazy. The employees lose even more respect for the boss. The cells lose even more respect for insulin. A vicious cycle, over and over and over and over. Now, when I get to the other slides, I'll show you how this is reversible. So that is insulin resistance in the nutshell and how it happens. The other thing is what I call dysbiosis. You may not know it, but in your gut, there are about 30 to 100 trillion bacteria that God, our Creator, put in our gut. Those 30 to 100 trillion bacteria, we call them the microbiome, okay? And they do several different functions. They help to digest fiber. They help to protect the gut from bacteria, help to regulate the immune system. And let me talk about the immune system a bit. You may not know it, but about 70% of the body's immune system resides in the gut. 70%. The remaining 30% resides in the bone marrow, the lymph nodes, the lymphatics. So when you have a healthy gut, that healthy gut trains the immune system in a healthy way. And it will look like this. Hey, when you see that bacteria right there is a bad guy. Take him out with this AK-47. Don't ask any questions. You see that other bacteria, don't use an AK. Use this bomb instead because it's even worse. It trains the immune system to, like, this is what you do when we're under attack. It also trains the immune system to say, hey, when you see that cell right there, even though that cell may look a little bit like a bacteria, it's not a bacteria. It's part of the body. Don't attack it. It's part of us. When your gut is not healthy, what your gut does is it gives an unhealthy training to the immune system. And that unhealthy training is an immune system that has its hand on the trigger. Just trigger happy, ready to shoot anything. And the unhealthy training looks like this. You see that bacteria, take it out. It's a bad thing. We don't want it. You see anything else that just looks or smells like a bacteria, shoot first, ask questions later. That is the training it does. So now it may see a cell of the body, that the cell of the body may just have a fibril, little antenna that just looks like a bacteria. Bam! It attacks it, whereas it's the cell of the body. And that's how autoimmune diseases develop, when you don't have a healthy gut to train the immune system in the healthy way. And it also helps to keep the gut strong, protect the gut, by producing some very special short-chain fatty acids that keep the strength of the gut and synthesize bacteria. That's the function of this. And this is called the microbiome. They are about 30 to 100 trillion bacteria that live in the gut. Now, when we say that you have dysbiosis or microbiome dysfunction, when there is an inequilibrium in the bad bacteria and good bacteria. So we're supposed to have a 50-50% population of bad bacteria and good bacteria, 50-50% population. When you have dysbiosis, what happens is the bad bacteria have increased in number and have kicked out the good bacteria, caused the good bacteria to be low. So you now have a situation where you have gone from equilibrium to disequilibrium. And when you have that, you have all of these diseases. And again, this slide is not exhaustive. There's so many diseases that we face today that are related to that imbalance. And you may be surprised to find anxiety and depression on here. Anxiety and depression are linked to the gut. Did you know that 90% of the hormone serotonin that helps to maintain our mood, 90% of it is produced in the gut? 90%. The remaining 10% is produced in the central nervous system, the brain. So when you have an unhealthy gut, the factory is down. If the factory is down, the factory doesn't produce its product, no doubt you have depression, anxiety, and all these other autoimmune diseases. Hashimoto is a trigger-happy immune system. Pow, 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 shooting everything that looks or smells like a bacteria. Same thing as lupus. MS is an autoimmune disease. So those are how energy imbalances coming from metabolic, coming from insulin resistance and microbiome dysfunction result in a slew of all of these diseases that we have. But the news is good, guys. And that's why I could no longer practice medicine the same way I practice medicine. Because science has now shown that if you reverse the energy deficiency, those diseases go away. Those diseases came as a result of energy deficiency. So if you are able to restore that energy deficiency, those symptoms go away. I explained to you how, high blood pressure came about. You restore the energy, the high blood pressure goes away. And I put it this way. Let's say you're driving on the road and your car runs out of gas. How many of you guys have ever run out of gas? Did your car stop or you continue to go? It stopped, right? That stopping, that the car has stopped is the same as the symptoms of all these diseases: diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. The car stops not because there is an intrinsic failure of the engine, but the car stops because the energy source, the gas, the fuel is not there. That's why the car stopped. It's not because you have intrinsic failure of your engine. So if you walk to the nearest gas station and you buy a gallon of gas and you walk back to your car on the road and you pump gas in that car, when you sit in the driver's seat and turns on the ignition, what happens? It starts again. It roars back to life again. Why? Because its problem was lack of energy. You restore this energy, the car roars to life again. It's so simple but so profound. It's exactly the same thing that we face today. If you reverse the energy deficiency, those diseases go away. And that should be good news to us. And I want to tell you guys about a solution of a product that I learned about. How many of you guys, again, are in the healthcare? So I learned about this too in March of this year. And I was surprised as a physician that these two things are listed in the PDR, in the physician's desk reference. Okay? I was very surprised to find out it's listed in the physician's desk reference. What are these and how are they a solution to reversing the issue? Both of these reverse insulin resistance and reverse dysbiosis. Let's talk about the very first one, this called the Unimate. When I talk about a nutraceutical, which are these products, it's a product made 100% from plants. It's made 100% from plants. It has nutritional value, but in addition to nutritional value, it has huge health benefits that outweigh the nutritional value. So it's called a nutraceutical for that reason. So the very first one on top here, right there, is called Unimate. Unimate is made from a plant that is native to the South Americas, Brazil. By the way, did you guys know that most of the medicines that we're given and all of that come from some kind of plants? Pharmaceutical industries, most of our medicines come from plants, and then, they have to tweak it here and there. But the great thing about this is this has no medicine in it. It is 100% plant-based. So it's made from a plant that is native to South America called the yerba mate plant. And this plant is very rich in a very special phytonutrient called chlorogenic acid. Chlorogenic acid. And chlorogenic acid is a very important phytonutrient. Chlorogenic acid. Why is it important? Because it helps to foster a biological process called lipolysis. Lipolysis is just simply a fancy medical term to say fat burning. And now I'll explain to you how fat burning can now be useful in reversing insulin resistance. So this plant contains chlorogenic acid. And if you will remember in my illustration of how you develop insulin resistance, there's a two-step process. You had too much fat that had crowded the cell, and the cell could not open its doors to glucose. So you have a cell that is Thanksgiving full like this. You have a cell that is Thanksgiving full and is plumped with fat and could not open its doors to glucose when insulin knocked, and glucose accumulated in the blood like that. Now, you now have this a nutraceutical product that is rich in chlorogenic acid, which causes fat burning. So it now goes to this cell that is filled with fat when you consume the Unimate, and starts to burn the fat in this cell, and this cell may transform to look like this. It still has some fat in it, but it has less fat than it did before. As lipolysis continues to occur, fat burning continues to occur, what happens is this cell now returns to status quo and is free now. Okay? The free cell can now take up all the glucose in the blood. When it now takes up all the glucose in the blood, that glucose can now go through the system to make ATP. You're reversing insulin resistance. The second way is that once you fix this first problem, since the first problem caused the second problem, it results in an automatic fixing of the second problem. Because when you had too much glucose, that too much glucose led to too much insulin. Okay? You had too much insulin, it was the CEO that had gone cuckoo. Now, when all the glucose gets into the cell, the glucose level in the blood drops to low, right? When the glucose level in the blood drops to low, one-to-one relationship, glucose and insulin, glucose concentration goes down. When the glucose concentration goes down, it's like the boss who had become cuckoo now becomes level-headed, goes to his employees and said, yeah, I'm sorry, I've been a jerk for the last 1 to 2 months. Will you forgive me? Has a humble head. The employees forgive, gain respect back for the boss, and do what the boss says. Same thing, when insulin levels now, when glucose levels is low, it causes insulin levels to be low. A low insulin is like humble now to the cell. It tells the cell, I'm sorry for shoving you around. The cells forgive it. The cell are more responsive to it and cause insulin glucose to enter the cell, reversing that. That's what the Unimate does because it contains chlorogenic acid. Fiber does exactly the same thing. Fiber helps you to be able to cause lipolysis. It causes fat burning. So it reverses insulin resistance in exactly the same way. But the other thing that fiber does, which is the second product, the balance, is that it causes you to have a low glycemic index. And I'm going to explain it to you like this and the ramifications of that. If let's say, what did I do here? Sorry. If let's say you and I went to, a restaurant to eat. We went to a restaurant to eat lasagna. And I know a thing or two about fiber and you do not. What fiber does is that fiber slows down the transit of food through the colon. So if food is supposed to move through the colon by this speed, fiber causes food to move through the colon by this speed. Fast transit of food through the colon, fast absorption, fast release of glucose into the blood. Okay? Slow transit of food through the colon, slow absorption, slow release of glucose into the blood. So if I and you went to a restaurant to eat lasagna, and I know a thing or two about this fiber product, you reach this balance, which is it contains fiber, 5 different fiber products. And I know a thing or two about that, you don't. If you eat your lasagna without consuming fiber, this is what your blood sugar is going to do. Okay? And that blood sugar may be 180. That's you right there. So me, I know a thing or two that fiber is going to slow down my transit of food. I consume the balanced product first. And when I consume that balanced product first, and then I consume the exact same quantity of the fiber, exact same quantity, this is what's going to happen. That's 9. I'll say 90. Let's put it that. So instead of my blood sugar doing this, my blood sugar does that. So instead of you have a blood sugar of 180, I have a blood sugar of 90. Fiber has decreased my glycemic index. And because you've produced a blood sugar of 180, your pancreas is going to have to produce a commensurate higher amount of insulin to deal with that blood sugar of 180. So your pancreas will produce insulin, maybe 20 units of insulin right here. For me, because I produce a lower amount of glucose, 90, my pancreas is going to produce a commensurate low amount of insulin. I may produce 5 units of insulin. I want you guys to think about it like this. High insulin is like that CEO that has gone crazy. The cells lose respect for it, and the cells don't do what it's supposed to do. Low insulin is like the CEO that is level-headed. The employees respect the CEO. Just the cells respect insulin more. And that is very important. We don't consume enough fiber. You know, our foods are so processed today that we're consuming very little amount of fiber. If you were to take a time machine and go 100 years back, our ancestors 1 generation ago did not know what diabetes was, did not know what high cholesterol was, did not know what sleep apnea was, fatty liver. All these things as a result of energy deficiencies that have come as a result of excess calories and come as a result of ultra-processed foods and foods and our diets deficient in fiber. And these two things, these two products are a simple way to be able to reverse that. The last thing is that fiber helps to reverse dysbiosis. We mentioned dysbiosis as when you have good bacteria outnumber the bad bacteria. How does that happen? When you do not have enough food, one thing I failed to mention is that fiber is a type of carbohydrate that our bodies do not digest. Then you scratch your head and say, okay, God, why in your infinite wisdom did you make fiber when we cannot get any calories from fiber? If you eat fiber, your body cannot get any calories from it. It's going to pass through your digest. It's not going to add 1 ounce of calories to you. Why that is? Because it is food to those bacteria in the gut. God designed that bacteria in the gut to help us live in a do for me, I do for you relationship. We have to give them food and shelter, and they have to do all these functions that I mentioned. But for them to be able to thrive, they need food. Every living organism, every living thing, whether it's a lion in the jungle of Cameroon or a bacteria in your gut, needs nutrients to survive. And the food for the microbiome, the food for the bacteria is fiber. Because our diets are so devoid of fiber, what happens is that the little fiber that is there, the bad bacteria shove it to themselves. As survival of the fittest mode kicks in, they proliferate and kick out the good bacteria, and then you have all these conditions. And just by consuming fiber, you now reverse that imbalance. So I end by saying this. If you have any chronic medical condition, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, sleep apnea, infertility, there are many women who suffer from PCOS and not able to give birth. It's as a result of energy deficiency. We have testimonies of women who have not been able to give birth for about 15 years because of PCOS, energy deficiencies. 4 months of being on this and reversing their insulin resistance, they've had a baby born. In fact, there was a baby born here in the DFW area this year, to a mother who had struggled to have kids for about 10 years. All these chronic medical conditions are related to energy deficiencies. And if you restore that energy deficiency, you could reclaim your health again. Your diabetes could be poof, gone. Your sleep apnea could be poof, gone. Your weight issues could be poof, gone. And so, thank you guys for inviting me here. I hope that enlightens you, gives you an opening to the fact that you do not need to live with your chronic medical conditions. Those things, just like putting gas back in your car and that car started again, if you refuel your system, your cells are gonna roar back to life again. Thank you for having me.